Yo, what's good with you? Back in black with another Enlisted video. If you guys are new to the channel and you love shooting games just like me, make sure you aim for that like button and shoot that subscribe button as well. It'll help you find better teammates and improve your skill-based matchmaking. Today we are doing another tier ranking for Enlisted, but this time we are doing all the campaigns and we are ranking them by difficulty. Of course, I will be taking each faction's respective perspective into consideration, because if I did not, it wouldn't be worthy of debate or conversation otherwise. So do let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section as we move along, or as we get to your personal favorite campaign in particular. So when it comes to the criteria that we're going to be using today to rank these factions and in their respective campaigns, of course, I boiled it down to 4 things. Number 1 is going to be the strengths and weaknesses of each faction. Number 2 is going to be the weapons available to that faction, and of course when you actually unlock said weapon, because I feel that also plays a factor in how, easy it is to play a certain faction or in a certain campaign or whatever the case may be. Number 3, I would be remiss if I did not take into consideration the vehicles available to that faction. And number 4, last but not least, how it feels to play that campaign in the beginning levels versus how it feels to play that campaign in the later levels versus how it feels to play them today. And I guess whenever you watch this video, with if it's within the first month or so, whatever the case may be. Just for a little more context on reason number 4, I'm sure you guys might be a little confused about that one. The reason I say you should take into consideration like how it feels to play a certain campaign in a certain time frame is because when a campaign is like freshly released, it plays a lot differently than a campaign that has been out since the beginning of the game, or a campaign that has been out for over a year, if that makes any sense. I'll explain a little more as I get further into the video, but I do want you to take that as into consideration, or as a little food for thought. Similarly to the same way we have 4 pieces of criteria that we were using to judge each faction and campaign and how hard it is to play, I have also formulated 4 divisions that we will be placing these campaigns in today. The first one is called the Super Sweaty Division. This is obviously the category where you either need to bring 3 teammates or be a god if you're going to play this campaign solo, which I would definitely put myself in that category. I'm sure a lot of you guys would as well. The next tier down is going to be the Try Hard category. This is the category that requires you to be on your A game sometimes, but there is some games here and there where the enemy team either sucks because you got on at a good time in the day, or because you were just in flow and just having a really good game. Whatever the case may be, teammates may come in handy sometimes at peak hours maybe, but of course this is completely optional as well. The third category is going to be the Chill Casual category. This is obviously where you want to go when you don't want to have to concentrate 100% of the time. Maybe you just got home from work and you want to focus on chatting with your friends in the party, more so than playing the game at 100% efficiency. Regardless, this is usually the campaign where victory is assured, usually 80 to 90% of the time. Teammates are not necessary in the slightest, but usually you would invite them if you just want to have a good time and play the game. And the last category is going to be the GG category. I find this one to be pretty self-explanatory. This is the category where if you're playing this campaign, you're obviously not really looking for a challenge in the slightest, and you probably just want some easy XP, or maybe you're just trying to, be a completionist and doing the campaigns that you wouldn't do normally otherwise. Whatever the case may be, no teammates are necessary, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to win unless you get in one of those blue moon situations where you're going up against a 4 stack. And yeah, man, all that being said, let's go ahead and get into these rankings, shall we? So contestant number 1 is already on the screen right now. We are playing some Moscow Axis, and for me, I gotta let you guys know first and foremost, I'm only level 16, whereas with the allies in Moscow, I'm a level 39, so a little bit of bias coming in, but you can just chalk it up to me not having all the weapons unlocked for the Axis already. The reason I haven't done that is because it's a little bit of redundancy playing Germany over and over again. again for like 3 different campaigns. So hopefully you can understand where I'm coming from on that one. But neither here nor there. What has been notable for me so far has been the MP38 at level 5, the Stuka at level 7, and the MG13 at level 10. The MP38 because, you know, it's basically an MP40 and one of the best submachine guns in the game, if I'm being quite frank with you. You gotta love the gun for that accuracy. The Stuka, on the other hand, that plane always has one of the better armaments when it comes to planes and Enlisted in general, especially when it comes to fighting infantry. And last but not least, that MG13, not the best clip or magazine size in the game, but the accuracy and the fire rate and how Germany usually always has the better machine guns and planes and tanks in the game has been making up for it so far. I will say I have a little bit of difficulty going against those higher level Moscow allied teams when I play this faction and campaign in particular, but I would say it's pretty even keel so far, which is a reoccurring theme that you will see with Moscow. So all that being said, I'm going to have to put Moscow Axis in the try-hard category because sometimes you do need a little bit of help no matter how good you're doing. It's unfortunate, but that's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes when you're a solo player. Moving on to contestant number 2, we gotta go ahead and swing it over to the other side and play some Moscow allies. And what do we have to say about them? For me, I have this campaign or this faction I should say maxed out at level 39. For me, what has been most notable at level 2 is that PPD stick magazine. To get that weapon so early on is a godsend, especially with the ridiculous fire rate, which mostly all Russian submachine guns seem to sport a ridiculously high fire rate for one reason or another. Level 11, you also get the PPD 34/38 with the drum magazine, which is basically a better version of what you get at level 2. And for them to have those two weapons so close together in the progression scale is also pretty crazy to me, because essentially you go from being able to mow down like 2, 3, 4, or 5 enemies to being able to mow down at least 2 or 3 squads if you shoot in bursts. So it's kind of crazy to me that they would consider that as well. And last but not least, I really enjoy the AVS at level 36, and then I enjoy the T50 and the T34 tanks as well. Not that they are necessarily better than all of the German tanks, but as you can see from this gameplay, I do quite a number on those German tanks when they do present themselves to me. So I think that's something to take into consideration as well. To me personally, once you hit the later levels in the Moscow campaign, everything is pretty even, which I already know Moscow is pretty notorious for being a balanced campaign as is. But I would say in the submachine gun category, Russia edges them out ever so slightly, and when you max them out, things get pretty easy overall. So I'm going to put this one in the fun/chill casual category, and you don't really need to play with friends to have a good time in this one and win very often. Coming in at number 3, we got Normandy Axis, which is kind of a similar situation to Moscow Axis, where I don't have it ranked up that far, and I'll say what I do have ranked up so far I do enjoy, particularly the FNAB 43 at level 5. I also enjoy that Gewehr 43 at level 7, but I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys. I find this campaign to be a little daunting, particularly because I'm level 18, and the machine gun, the only machine gun that you have to work with up until that point is the Beretta. And if you know anything about the Beretta, you know that gun is deplorable, horrible, and that might be a bit of an understatement, because oh my God, dude, that gun is so bad. You just don't understand. Like, you could be looking at a wall, and when you shoot the bullet will go perpendicular, like on some Wanted. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Wanted, where they like curve the bullets, but that is essentially how that gun behaves, and not in a good way, unfortunately, not in a cool way anyways. It's unfortunate because anybody or any faction that uses the Beretta is inherently at a disadvantage, and it's very apparent because that gun is just, again, is so bad. And I am aware that the pendulum of difficulty swings very often in Normandy, but I'm going to be quite frank with you. I don't see anybody winning in this campaign easily unless you go in there with a bunch of friends, or if you're just playing at non-peak hours. If it wasn't for the fact that I had a couple of premium squads from events that I have done in the past, I would definitely be struggling, and this is a prime example right here, this FG42 squad that I am using. Again, if it wasn't for this, I would be having a pretty bad time, and honestly, this gameplay would not look as good as it does. But again, all that being said, I'm gonna have to put Normandy Axis in the tryhard category. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but it's still something where you probably want to be on your A game if you're not bringing some teammates. So do with that information what you will. Conversely, and coming up next, we are now going to take a look at the Normandy Allies campaign, which I would argue is probably the most popular campaign in faction in the entirety of Enlisted. The reason I say that is because there's constantly an influx of new players that I am always having to carry, being that I am maxed out at level 39. I'm sure anybody else who is also maxed out would have a similar feeling or situation. That being said, even on the way to reaching those later levels, you do have a multitude of iconic weaponry to help you do so, which makes this campaign one of the easier ones to stomach in my personal opinion. And most notably at level 7 you get that M1 Garand. Once you get that semi-auto, that does make any campaign for that matter way easier to stomach. Next up is the very underrated grease gun at level 9. This gun is very underutilized in my personal opinion, sporting one of the higher damages in the game and great accuracy despite that lower fire rate. Next up, my personal favorite is the good old 30 cal, which you unlock at level 35. This unlock in itself definitely makes the Normandy campaign a permanent, casual, chill, fun, easy kind of campaign in my personal opinion. But if it wasn't for that, I would still have to give a shout out to the M2 carbine, which is jack of all trades kind of rifle, which is basically an assault rifle. Kind of helps you dispatch your enemies at a alarmingly quick rate. And the Germans don't really have anything to compete up until the later levels, so for the most part, if you are going against somebody who is also not level 39 on the respective opposite side, you will be mopping up a lot of these Germans pretty easy, as you can see me do the same thing, letting them spawn on that rally point. And all that being said, when you take a look at the vehicles, I would say it's pretty even all around. Although the M4A2 Sherman that the Americans get is pretty OP, because I don't even think the Jumbo or whatever type of Sherman that was that good in real life in comparison to the German tanks. I'm pretty sure the Americans won most of their tank battles with numbers as opposed to with superior tanks, for lack of better words. But again, I mean, I guess for gameplay balances and purposes, the M4A2 is pretty darn good as far as tanks in the entire game. I have never had a bad game where I have made using that tank. And of course, you kind of can just, you don't have to bring teammates. You can stack up if you want to. On rare occasions, you will see the Germans do very similar things, and then it'll be a very competitive game. But more often than not, again, I'm kind of just chilling, mowing down a lot of enemies, and doing it very casually with a fun, relaxed kind of vibe and attitude. So this is a campaign that I can go to if I want to challenge myself a little bit, but not too much, or occasionally I will get a challenge here and there and I have the equipment to deal with it appropriately. So I'm going to put Normandy allies in the chill, fun, casual category. Coming up next at number 5, we have the very storied Berlin campaign, which is one of my personal favorites to play due specifically to how late war the equipment and the weapons are. You're not going to get your hands on much better weaponry in the game than when you're playing in the Berlin campaign. And ironically, the Axis in particular has seen a very, very resounding resurgence, especially as of late. And you kind of had to be there to know exactly how bad it was at first, but when this campaign first launched, the Axis were getting their shit pushed in, and very, very heavily so, if I do say so myself. I know so because I was there, coming from somebody who, usually chooses the Allies more often than not. This time around, when this campaign released, I decided that I would take my talents to the Axis side, and I mean, it was fun, but at what cost? And the cost was my mental sanity, because for months and months and months, it was next to impossible almost to win a game, especially when you were playing on the Axis side in this campaign. The Russians were very, very much so a steamroller, very, very akin to how they were in real life. And I guess that was people trying to maintain the status quo, because nowadays, as of late, I guess that's just the simple fact that most people have maxed their first side out already and have switched to the opposite side. Again, the Germans have seen what has been called quote-unquote Steiner's counterattack, if you have been paying attention to the memes on Reddit and whatnot. But yeah, man, you can see it in the gameplay itself. It's pretty rough going for the Russians nowadays, and I feel bad for anybody who loaded up the German campaign lately for the first time thinking they were going to get some easy wins playing as the Russians and steamrolling the Germans all the way to the Reichstag. It is not that way anymore. We are definitely in video game land, because this is more or less an alternative history, and it kind of makes sense because for the Germans, when you get in the later levels, you basically have a bunch of FG-42s, you have STG-44s, and then you also have Panzernormal magazine machine guns. And when you give a whole squad like at least 3 or 4 of those a person, it's not really fair. So that being said, this campaign is pretty easy to play now, whether you got friends or not. I wish it was always that way from the get-go, but I'm happy it's that way now, because I can thoroughly enjoy myself and say this is one of my favorite factions. On the flip side of that coin, what started out as a bunch of easy wins for the Russians, and honestly I kind of regret not taking part in that when this campaign first came out. I kind of basically should have just went with the status quo and went where all the people, went on the first go around. But I just had to be a contrarian, and to my detriment, here I am now playing the Russians and having what is called a struggle fest, because quite frankly, even when you get in the higher levels and get your hands on a bunch of machine guns and late game equipment, which is very much so on par with the Germans, you're still gonna have a hard time and struggle. And it's very ironic because, again, even with the vehicles, I would say it's pretty much on par. The Russian planes and the German planes in the late war are pretty even, and the same thing can be said about the tank aside from the King Tiger 2. But even then, I have been blown up in that tank on multiple occasions as well, and the same thing can be said on the opposite side for the Russians. It's very easy to blow their tanks up. Usually most tank battles will go in 1 to 2 hits, and I guess whoever wins or hits the vital spot first, and that's pretty much it. These guns are very big and very powerful, so there's not much room for error. And circling back around to the planes, I don't find them to be that useful in this campaign, no matter which side you're on. The reason being is the extra tall buildings, and you have to be a very skilled pilot to maneuver and drop those bombs within those tight city streets. Not that it's impossible, but you're not going to have that much success unless you're on those open maps in the CeeLo Heights. I think another fair assessment to make is that most of the skilled players who play this game are going to conglomerate in the Berlin campaign, because again, that's where most of the advanced weaponry is, and that's probably where you're going to have the best time mowing down swaths of enemies with automatic weapons in 1944 to 1945, which makes 100% sense in that area as well. But all that being said, the difficulty in this campaign is pretty much bar none, especially nowadays. It used to be a cakewalk, but now this is probably up there with top 3 hardest campaigns and factions in the games. And I know so because I am currently level 16, and what I thought was going to be an easy rank up has turned into a bit of a slugfest, because a lot of the Germans conglomerate and put in those 3 and 4 stack teams with a bunch of automatic weapons, especially those MG 42s and MG 34s in the late game levels. So yeah, definitely going to have your work cut out for you, especially if you are on the offense and having to cross open ground. They will be mowing you down a multitude of times. And that's what is leading me to say that this campaign should definitely be considered being put in the I don't know, I'm kind of leaning between like super sweaty and try hard. I'm gonna have to say that the Russian Berlin campaign nowadays is probably gonna be in the super sweaty category, because you can ink out some wins here and there, but more often than not you're gonna be having a tough outing against these Germans and their superior tanks and their superior machine guns. Yo, so I was trying to think of an analogy for how it feels to play the Axis in Tunisia, because quite frankly it is an experience unlike any other in this entire game. And what I came up with is that it is the equivalent of playing basketball, right? And let's say you look over, see who the team you're playing next is. You see that they are literally all over 6 foot, and the one guy that they have who is not over 6 foot is 5'11" and over 250 pounds. So it's just one of those things where, you know, the next game you're going into, you're going to get your ass whooped, but it's just another one of those things where you got to go in there and give it your best effort, even though you know you are going up against a superior fighting force. And that is literally what it feels like playing against the British as the Italians in this campaign, because yeah man, the guns that you get early on they're literally all garbage. And you can let me know how you feel about this down in the comment section, but I'm gonna ask you, the Carcano, for example, the bow action rifle that you get at the beginning for the Italians, is that not literally the worst iron sight that you have ever seen on a bow action rifle? And then, I mean, it's cool, I guess, that it has a 6-round magazine, but it's like one extra bullet for like the worst iron sight that you could ever have. And then you gotta upgrade to the shitty ass MP28, which is also a pretty horrible gun in my personal opinion. That gun has more bullet spread than Oregon's offense when they play football. If anybody does watch football that is watching this video, you know what I'm talking about. And then of course after that you have to upgrade to the deplorable Beretta MG, which is probably up there for worst guns in the game. You would probably be better off using a pistol half the time, but that is another story for another day. I'm using this M1 Beretta here, which is pretty decent, and it takes forever to get that gun as it is, but as you can see, it's kind of a pea shooter because I'm putting multiple bullets into these guys and they're still running around like it's all good. So another one of those things where you have to aim for the head or the upper chest if you hope to have any success, which is very unfortunate. And don't get me started on the vehicles. The Italians literally have the worst vehicles in the game, driving around with a paper thin armor box truck, and then the one tank that they actually do get their hands on after that can still get one shot by any of the vehicles that the the British have, and then the machine gun only has 20 bullets, so it's like you're reloading all the time on top of that. So it's really bad, and it's just not fun. It's one of those things where, like, if you load this campaign up, you are either actively seeking out a challenge that is on par with Elden Ring, or you're just one of those people who are a masochist. But if you do happen to pull out a win whenever you are playing this campaign, it is literally one of the best feelings in the world, similar to taking a hit at DMT, because the high is unparalleled and unprecedented, because you literally got a win in a situation where there was like a 1 to 2% chance of you actually doing so. So whenever you do, is one of those things where you can most definitely pat yourself on the back and congratulate any teammates that you do have, because I would definitely recommend bringing in some people that you can actually talk to and have decent communication with, because God knows the randoms aren't going to help you in any way, shape, or form when you're playing this campaign. All that being said, you know, I wouldn't recommend playing it, because, you know, when the merger does happen, they're going to take all the Italian weapons and merge it into the German faction anyway. So it's one of those things where if you are playing it now, you're more or less wasting your time, or again, you're just looking for that challenge, in which case, again, I would implore you to go play Elden Ring instead of suffer trying to grind out the Italians in this campaign, because it is not the most fun experience. I mean, it's not the worst, but it could be better. Switching over from despair to elation, we gotta come over and take a look at the Tunisia ally side, which is probably the easiest. No, I'm pretty sure I can say that indubitably that playing the British is probably the easiest cakewalk you can have in this game, because the Italians, quite frankly, don't have anything in their arsenal that can really keep up until they get into the later levels, and that's if they have the willpower to even do so before they quit or move on to another faction. And again, let's look at this from the standpoint of the weapons. If you look at the rifles, you have the Enlisted and stuff like that, which has a 10-round magazine and shoots way faster and has way better iron sights in comparison to the Carcano, which has less damage, doesn't shoot as fast, and the iron sights are not as good. If you look at the submachine guns, you can compare the Sten to the MP28, which they're both not really the best gun, but I would take a Sten over an MP28 any day. And then, you know, later on you're going to get the Thompson anyway, so does it really matter? Not only that, if you play the British out even further, you get a 50-round magazine Thompson. So in close range situations, the Italians have literally nothing that can keep up with the firepower that you can put out. And if you're not using a Thompson, you would probably be using a Bren or some other machine gun anyways. And even then, the Enlisted is probably one of the best weapons in the game, generally speaking. It's very underrated. I know people don't really like bow action rifles, but yeah, man, take that into consideration. And like I said, when you look at these tanks, you can see that they are pretty horrible and easy to get rid of, whether you are infantry or in a tank of your own. So the Italians aren't really messing with the British in that area either. And then when you look at the planes, the Dauntless is exorbitantly better than any plane that the Italians have. I don't even know what the Italian planes are called, but if you're not using a German plane, then it's really not worth flying at all when you're playing as the Italians. And just to drive my point home even more, this game of confrontation took me literally under like 10 minutes if I'm not mistaken. I forget what the exact time was, but it's to a point where I can literally like have a full-blown conversation, send text messages, and still pull out a win. And then I can do stuff like this, like hit the main flank on somebody unsuspecting. Is like, when stuff like this is happening to you, is it even fun trying to play the Italians? I asked this for anybody who is an Italian main, because I'm having fun, but I know this guy right here is not. So, you know, I'm gonna give the British the GGEZ category. getting away from all that absurd imbalance that presents itself in the Tunisia campaign, we're going to stop and take a look at the Axis in the Pacific, which kind of follow in the same vein as Germany. Like when this campaign first came out, the Japanese were struggling to get any type of wins. I myself personally was hovering around a 50 win percentage, which is pretty horrible for me, all things considered, and I would chalk that up to people trying to maintain the status quo as far as historical accuracy is concerned, because as of late my win percentage with the Japanese has been climbing very steadily. That being said, I would say the equipment between the two is kind of imbalanced at first, but then what I really found that I appreciate about the Japanese faction is that they are very defined in their roles, or rather in their strengths and weaknesses. And what I mean by that is that they are really good when it comes to the long range game, and the reason being is because their bolt action rifles are simply amazing. The iron sights are pretty much on par with the Russian bolt action rifles, or actually no, I would say that they are better, and they shoot just as fast and have amazing accuracy. Not only that, I know the situation doesn't always call for it in the Pacific, but if you can limit your engagements to long range, you will find yourself dispatching Americans at a pretty surprising rate. When you get to submachine guns, on the other hand, they do get a bad rap for shooting kind of slow, but what they make up for in that area is having great accuracy. And again, as long as you aim for the chest or the upper head, you should see yourself having a great time with these submachine guns as well. What I really appreciate about the Japanese on top of that is the machine guns that they have available, particularly the Type 97 and the Type 93. One has a scope on it, and whenever you have an automatic weapon with a scope in any campaign, especially one in 1941, you will have a distinct advantage in comparison to your enemies. And then we got the Type 93, I believe this is, with a 30 round magazine, basically a Bren LMG, which is way better than the BAR that only has 20 bullets. I know the Americans have the Johnson LMG at the end, but that's literally at the end, so this will help you out in the meantime up until then. When it comes to the vehicles, I will admit that Japan does suffer in some regard in this area, particularly the tanks, because they have very, very bad tanks. They have open top vehicles that can easily be dispatched with bullets, more so than an explosive pack. And then on top of that, the tanks that they do have that have decent cannons are very big and cumbersome. The planes are pretty even, and they both have, you know, decent bombs with below average machine guns. All that being said, Japan is really fun to play, so I'm gonna have to put these guys in the try hard category. You do gotta bring your A game, but you're gonna have a good time when you do so, or if you bring a teammate to help you out. Switching over to the allies in the Pacific, I would argue that this is probably number 2, if not number 1, as far as the popularity contest is concerned, up there with Normandy, and with good reason, because quite frankly, this is one of the most enjoyable campaigns to play in this entire game. Not only is the Pacific one of the newer campaigns that have come out recently, but the balance between the Japanese and the Americans in this campaign is actually pretty good in my personal opinion. While the Japanese do excel at long range, the Americans on the other hand excel at close range, with their use of semi-automatic weapons and you know, I guess fully automatic weapons as well when you get up there in the later levels, starting out with that good old tried and true M1 Garand. Of course, you eventually end up with the Thompson and the BAR. The Thompson is kind of mid in the Pacific, mostly due to, like, unless you got that premium squad with the 20 round magazine one, but that's neither here nor there. What you really want to be looking out for is that M2 carbine, because once you get that, again, it's a jack of all trades kind of gun, so you're pretty much set in stone as far as having a good time in this campaign. The Johnson LMG is also really good, but of course that's like the last unlock, if I'm not mistaken, so just something to keep in mind. Your vehicles, as far as the tanks, will always have an advantage over the Japanese, and then you can use the planes as you see fit, and basically I don't think there's that many Japanese pilots anyway, so you'll be dominating the skies as well. I did say pretty much everything I have to say about the Americans. I'm going to put this in the casual / fun category. I do have an honorable mention that I need to talk about, which is the Stalingrad campaign, so I'm going to go ahead and switch over to that right now. nothing crazy that I have anything to say about it, because I quite frankly don't play it that much due to their super egregious money making methods with this campaign in particular. I think they saw that they weren't getting that much traction as far as the player base is concerned, so what they did is they basically turned it into a money grab. You can spend the extra $40 and you get like 4 times the freaking rank up speed with a bunch of new guns and stuff like that. I did not personally like that, and I decided not to purchase it, and I decided not to play this campaign anymore. So as such, I just want to say that this is going to be short and sweet. Therefore, whenever I do play the Germans or the Russians in the Stalingrad campaign, it's pretty even kill on both sides. The weaponry is pretty much the same in 1941, so nothing crazy to say about it. If you have something more to say, let me know down in the comment section, because again, I don't play it, but I do want to know what you guys think about my ratings, and I do appreciate you guys very much for watching. Let me know what you think, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Blvckguy out.